I can still smell that night. Metal, wet trash, and something faintly like dried blood. Detroit was so silent that all I could hear was the wind hissing through broken window frames. I was driving home from the night shift at the plant when my headlights caught something in the puddled lane ahead. A black trash bag rising and falling ever so slightly as if something inside was breathing. I eased off the gas. The thin plastic fluttered with the wind, then jerked hard. A low sound came out hoarse, trembling. Not a cat, not a rat. It was the sound of a living creature trying to say, "Help me." I pulled over, opened the door, and rain slapped straight into my face. The cold cut through my coat, but my heart felt colder. I bent down, took hold of the bag's edge, and pulled. My throat closed up. Inside was a Doberman mother so thin, her ribs stood out beneath blood-matted fur. Her muzzle was bound tight with old electrical wire sunk so deep the fur around her neck was black with blood. She was drenched and shivering. I stepped back, but then heard a faint crackling beneath her. I peeled the bag aside. 3 tiny lives huddled against her belly, pink and blind, clinging to her bruised body for warmth. One was so weak it couldn't even cry, its mouth opening into the rain, as if trying to drink the air. Before me, blood from the wire wound blended with the rain running in a red line across the plastic. The Doberman tried to lift her head, but the binding forced her neck down. Still, she was biting at the wire, strangling her, biting for air, biting so her pups could keep drawing what little warmth she had left. I dropped to my knees, my hands shaking. "Oh God," I whispered. "Who could do this?" She looked up at me. That look, I will never forget it. Not fear, not anger. It was the look of a mother begging for her children's lives. A look I had seen once before on my wife's face the night of the accident 3 years ago, when I held her as she slipped away. I pulled my pocket knife and cut the wire. Each slice made her flinch, but she never growled. Only breathed in rasps, water and blood spraying from each desperate breath. When the last loop fell free, she collapsed, her head striking the concrete, her breath thin as smoke. I stripped off my coat and wrapped it around her. The rain kept hammering down cold and heavy, but something inside me had already broken open. I bent low, listening to her heart stumble, skip, then stop for a beat. I thought she was gone. But a moment later, a tiny sound rose like the sigh of someone utterly spent. Then something impossible happened. One of the 3 pups, no bigger than my hand, lifted its head and let out a piercing cry. High, sharp, almost like a baby's wail in the rain. I don't know how such a small chest produced such a sound. But at that cry, the Doberman mother shuddered, drew in a deep breath, her whole body convulsing, her lungs swelling once more. I don't know if it was reflex or a miracle. I only know she came back. I gathered all 4 of them from the bag and staggered toward my truck. Rain soaked my hair, but I didn't feel cold anymore. I tucked them inside my coat, set them gently on the passenger seat, and glanced in the rearview mirror. There was still light in her eyes. I switched on the cabin light and spoke softly, afraid to wake them. "It's all right, Mama. I hear you now, and I'm not leaving." I hit the gas water spraying from the tires. Behind me, the black trash bag drifted into the rainwater and vanished into the dark. If you're still listening to me now, stay until the end. Because what I found in that trash bag didn't just save a life, it saved me. I drove through the rain, the wipers slashing back and forth as if trying to erase what I'd just seen. But that image clung to me, the Doberman mother inside that trash bag, rain washing over her bleeding wounds, her 3 trembling pups pressed against her chest. Every raindrop that hit the windshield turned into blood in my mind. I knew I had to keep them alive until morning. My apartment was only 10 minutes away, tucked inside an old factory block off East Warren. When I opened the door, the smell of rust and old oil mixed with the faint warmth from a worn-out space heater. I laid my soaked coat on the floor and carefully unfolded it. The Doberman was still breathing, but barely. Her pups huddled at her belly, mouths open, searching for life in the dark. I had never seen such strength, the body nearly gone, yet still fighting to keep others warm. I went to the small medicine cabinet in the kitchen, pulled out gauze, saline, and an old suture kit left from my days as a firefighter. My hands shook so hard I dropped the needle twice. I wasn't a doctor, but I'd stitched my own hand once in the smoke of a burning house. I knew at least what had to be done. I cleaned the blood, trimmed the fur around the wound, and began to sew. Each time the needle passed through her skin, she trembled her throat, letting out a low, cracked sound like someone enduring pain in silence so her children could sleep. "Hold on, Mama," I whispered. "You're not dying tonight." I slid a small heater under a flannel blanket and wiped each puppy clean. They were frail, but breathing. The smallest one, lighter brown than the others, kept nudging my hand, its tiny mouth moving as if searching for milk. I placed it on my chest, listening to its faint heartbeat. I don't know when my eyes began to fill with tears. On the wall hung the photo of my daughter Lucy, 8 years old, curly hair, smiling in the grass. I hadn't looked at it straight in 3 years, but that night under the weak yellow light her smile tore right through me. Lucy loved dogs. She once said, "Daddy, if a stray dog could talk, I think it would only say one thing: don't leave me." Now I looked down at the Doberman and realized my little girl had been right. The mother's breathing was ragged. Each inhale came with a wheeze deep in her chest. I took an old syringe, mixed warm water with powdered milk, and dripped it slowly into her mouth. She swallowed weakly, and each swallow made a small line of blood seep from her lip. I wiped it away and murmured, "Go on. Don't fight it. You've done enough." In that moment, something inside me went still. The thunder stopped. The pounding on the roof faded. There was only her breathing, barely between life and death. And I remembered the fire that night, the smoke so thick I couldn't see a face, and my wife's voice screaming from the second floor. I ran up, but the roof gave way within seconds. I pulled my daughter out, but my wife never made it through. And by morning, Lucy didn't wake either, her lungs too full of smoke. Since then, I'd never saved anyone. Not until tonight. I took a clean rag and wiped each streak of blood from the Doberman's legs. Every time my hand touched her, she glanced at me tired, but never afraid. When I finished, she inched her head forward and pressed her muzzle against my wrist. The gesture was small, almost unconscious, but it hit me like a wordless thank you. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city still glistened under the streetlights. I sat beside them, listening to the steady rhythm of 4 fragile breaths beneath the blanket. 1 breath, 2, then 3 faint sighs like tiny notes in a song about survival. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat there watching the mother rest beside her litter, hearing the heater crackle softly. In the dim light, her wound glowed faintly pink, as if someone somewhere was stitching the world back together with invisible thread. And I knew then I'd stumbled into something bigger than a rescue. It wasn't just about keeping a dog alive. It was about learning how to live again. By dawn, the sky had turned pale gray, like a damp cloth draped over the city of Detroit. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered with puddles reflecting the weak light from the street lamps. I stood by the window, coffee gone cold in my hand, my eyes fixed on the blue blanket on the floor. Under it lay 4 lives, silent, fragile, and somehow still breathing. The Doberman mother lay still, her head resting on my old coat. Her neck was still bandaged, but her breathing had grown steadier. The 3 little ones were curled tight against her belly, their tiny noses twitching, letting out soft sounds like dreaming sighs. I knelt beside them and touched her stomach with my fingertips warm. That warmth spread into my palm, then into my chest. For the first time in years, the apartment didn't feel empty. I lit the old fireplace and fed it a few dry logs. The flame flickered across the walls, reflecting off her black and tan coat. Each time the fire cracked, her eyes opened slightly, as if she were still standing guard. I whispered, "It's all right now, Mama. You're safe here." She blinked once, maybe just a reflex, but I chose to believe it was an answer. I stepped outside to fill a kettle with warm water, then came back and began cleaning her wounds. The stitches from last night had held the edges drying to a dark crust. I worked gently, afraid to tear the skin. She trembled every time I touched her, but didn't pull away. It was as if she understood I wasn't here to hurt her. Each time I finished, she licked my hand once, small warm touches that made me bite my lip to steady myself. Just as I was about to change the gauze, the phone rang. A woman's voice came through after the third ring. "Riverview Animal Hospital. You called around 2 this morning, right? Is this an emergency?" I took a breath. I found a Doberman mother tied up. 3 puppies with her. I don't know if they'll make it. "Bring them in right away," she said quickly. "We've got a doctor on call this morning." I looked down at the 4 lives lying bundled on the floor. They were still too weak. I hesitated. She's too fragile to move. I'm afraid. Her voice softened. "What's your name, Ethan? All right, Ethan. Keep them warm. Don't let them lie on anything damp. We'll come to you." 15 minutes later, I heard a small van pull up outside. A woman stepped out, a thin-frame white coat soaked from the rain, face tired, but eyes sharp with resolve. "Grace Mitchell," she said, introducing herself. "And this is Sam, my nurse." Grace knelt by the Doberman, moving her fingers gently along the neck and down the hind legs. "She's lost a lot of blood, but her heartbeat's strong. You did well," she said softly. I let out a rough laugh. I used to stitch myself up in burning houses. Grace looked up, our eyes meeting. "Then you know better than most. Survival is never just luck." She opened her kit, gave the Doberman an antibiotic shot, and rebandaged the wounds with clean wraps. "She needs fluids. I'll start an IV here, less strain than moving her." While Grace worked, Sam warmed milk and fed the 3 pups through tiny syringes. They swallowed weakly but kept trying. Watching them, I felt something strange. The apartment I'd locked myself inside for 3 years had suddenly become a small rescue station for life itself. Grace stood glancing around. "What will you do once they recover?" I hesitated. "I don't know yet. I just know I can't hand them over." "Not now." She smiled gently. "Maybe they're not planning to leave you either." Before leaving, Grace set down a few packets of medicine and a care sheet. When the door closed, the room fell into quiet again. Only the sound of rain dripping outside the porch and the steady breath of 4 living souls. I sat beside them, running my hand down the mother's head. "Nova," I murmured. She stirred slightly. I smiled. "I'll call you Nova. Means a star that explodes to bring light into the dark." She didn't understand words, but her brown eyes glistened, as if they caught the meaning anyway. A light flickered there, not from the lamp, not from the fire, but from within where it had once gone out. And I thought maybe every soul gets one chance to start over. And last night, it wasn't just Nova who got saved. Maybe I did too. I looked up at the window. The first morning light slipped through the wet glass and fell across her face. In that light, everything looked peaceful. I never believed that something left to die in a trash bag could make my heart beat again. But this morning, in that small room, I heard it clearly, 4 soft breaths, and my own heartbeat joining theirs, all blending into one quiet sound of life. That afternoon, the rain finally stopped. Detroit lay under a pale gray light, cold and metallic like steel. I stepped out onto the balcony and watched the traffic below. Cars streamed past each one, chasing something work phone calls noise. No one knew that in a ground-floor apartment just beneath them a man was holding 4 fragile lives, fighting for every breath. Nova lay in the corner of the blanket, her head resting on a pillow, eyes half open, half dreaming. The 3 pups, now dry, nestled tight against her belly. I'd changed the bandages, cleaned the blood, but the wounds were still red and swollen. Grace's medicine would last only 2 more days. I needed antibiotics, gauze, and puppy formula. And I knew what that meant. I'd have to go out there again. I put on my coat, pulled the cap low, and locked the door behind me. Out on the street, the wind carried the smell of gas fumes and fried donuts from the corner shop. The smells of a city still alive, still breathing, but somehow indifferent. I stopped at the first pet clinic I saw, its windows plastered with photos of smiling dogs. A blonde woman stepped up to the counter, her smile mechanical. "Hi there, what can I help you with? I rescued a Doberman mother, badly injured. 3 puppies with her. I need antibiotics, gauze, and milk replacer." Her brows drew together. "Are you a vet?" "No. But sorry, we can't sell prescription meds without an order. And you said she's a stray." "I'm not sure. Maybe abandoned." She stepped back slightly, her tone shifting. "You should call animal control. We can't handle strays here, they can carry disease." I stood still, gripping the 1 small bottle of antiseptic I'd managed to grab. "She's not diseased, she's just trying to live." But the woman had already turned away. Rules are rules. The door shut behind me with a hollow jingle of the bell. I stepped back into the drizzle. 2 more stops, a pharmacy, and another pet store gave me the same answer. "Sorry, can't help you." At the last shop, the old man behind the counter stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You know, son, if they don't make it, at least you did your part." I looked at him. "My part? What does that mean?" He shrugged. "The world can't save everything. Some things are just meant to disappear." I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out, my hands trembling with anger. As I stepped into the street, headlights swept over me. For a moment, I saw my reflection in a glass door, an exhausted man with the same look I'd seen in Nova's eyes last night, broken but still holding on. By the time I got home, the sky had turned to charcoal. I opened the door. Nova was still in the same spot, but when I knelt beside her, she lifted her head, eyes wide, dim but glowing. The 3 pups stirred tails, twitching weakly. I placed the bottle on the floor. "I'm sorry, Mama. No one wanted to help, but I'll find a way." I turned on the old radio, just static. Beneath the crackle, I thought I heard breathing. I switched on the heater, and the soft gold light spread across the room, catching Nova's eyes. She looked at me, then licked my hand. A small gesture, but in that instant it felt as if the whole world had bowed to a soul that refused to give up. I poured the antiseptic and cleaned her wounds again. She flinched, letting out a low moan. I whispered, "I know it hurts, but I've been there too. When you lose everything, the only thing left to do is live." Just then, from the apartment next door, the evening news drifted through the wall. The anchor's voice was calm, steady. A man in the East Warren district was caught on camera, rescuing a Doberman found inside a trash bag during last night's storm. The video is spreading rapidly across social media. I froze. A camera. Someone saw? I stepped to the window. On the corner, a few people were gathered, faces lit by the glow of their phones. I saw myself on the screen, a figure bent low in the rain, pulling a black bag from the gutter. A woman in the crowd called out, "Hey, isn't that you?" I said. Nothing. They didn't know who I was, and it didn't matter. But I heard a little girl's voice say softly, "Poor thing. How could anyone do that to her and her babies?" I closed the window, my heart pounding. For the first time in years, this city was listening. I looked at Nova. She blinked slowly, then shifted, resting her head on my leg. The movement was small, almost nothing, yet it carried a quiet strength, a declaration. I held her paw gently and whispered, "We're not alone anymore." Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees carrying the scent of new rain, and for the first time I felt that Detroit was breathing with us. 2 days later, the sky cleared. Detroit looked a little less gray, though the cold still hung in the air as if the sun was only visiting out of politeness. I tidied the apartment and hung the blue blanket out on the balcony. Nova was stronger now. She could push herself up on her front legs, wobble a few steps, then lie down beside her 3 pups. Each time I opened the door, she lifted her head and watched me. There was no fear left in her eyes, only trust. I looked at them for a long while, then decided to go back to the landfill where it all began. I needed to clean that place up at least to make sure no one else ended up abandoned like them. The road that had been slick with rain was dry and cracked now. Old tires and broken wires still lay scattered across the ground. As I bent to pick them up, a light wind stirred a scrap of faded blue cloth caught on a coil of wire. I pulled it free. It was frayed, dirty, and still damp, but through the faded threads one line of white stitching remained intact. For Lucy. I froze. My breath caught midair. My hand trembled and my heart felt as if someone had reached inside and gripped it tight. Lucy. The name left my mouth like a prayer buried too long. That was my daughter's name. I sank down onto the dirt, still holding the cloth. 3 years ago, after the fire, I donated all of Lucy's clothes, blankets, and pillows to a local shelter. I'd packed them myself, sealed the boxes, labeled them for donation. I never thought I'd see a single thing from that day again. But here it was, my daughter's cloth tangled in the same wires that had bound the Doberman. I looked around. The street was silent except for the sound of the wind brushing through power lines. I could almost feel Lucy there, standing somewhere in the pale light. I pressed the fabric to my chest, breath shaking. The world blurred, and 2 images overlapped in my mind, the smiling child in the photograph and Nova's eyes that night in the trash bag. Both had the same quiet plea not to be loved, but simply to be seen, to be heard. I drove home with no radio, no headlights. When I opened the door, Nova lifted her head. I knelt beside her and held out the cloth. She leaned forward, touched her nose to it, and sniffed for a long time. Then something strange happened. She whimpered a sound that was half sigh, half cry. Her legs trembled, and slowly she lay down again, her head still resting on the fabric. I sat beside her, tears spilling freely. I didn't know if it was a coincidence or the world's way of stitching shut the hole in my heart. But I believed somehow that Lucy had sent Nova to me to save me the same way I'd saved her. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat there watching Nova and her pups resting peacefully. The soft yellow lamplight fell across the blue cloth, and the white thread gleamed faintly like a thin line of moonlight. I whispered, "Thank you, Lucy. Your father heard you this time." Outside, the Detroit wind rose again, but this time it wasn't cold. It felt like a small hand brushing gently across my shoulder. The next morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. At the door stood a boy of maybe 17, hair-wet, phone in hand. He looked nervous. "Sir, are you the man from the video? The one who saved the dog in the trash bag?" I nodded. He held up his phone. On the screen, the video played the rain-soaked night me kneeling in the street, my hands trembling as I pulled the bag open. From somewhere off-camera, a voice gasped, "He's saving her." My God. Below the video were hundreds of thousands of shares and comments. Good people still exist. "Thank you, sir. She deserves to live," the boy said quietly. I filmed it. I never thought it would spread like this. I looked at him, then at Nova lying under her blanket, her eyes half closed. "It's all right. Maybe because of you, the city finally knows they exist." Less than an hour later, 3 vehicles pulled up outside my building. A local news van, an animal rescue truck, and a small minivan carrying neighbors I'd never spoken to before. A middle-aged woman stepped out holding a large bag. "I brought some food and ointment," she said. "I saw the video and I just wanted to help." A man followed her, a welder from the nearby plant holding a piece of metal. "I made a new gate," he said, "so nobody can throw anything over that fence again." And behind them stood a little girl, maybe 10, clutching a rubber bone toy. She stepped forward shyly and said, "This is for the puppies." I couldn't speak. My throat locked up. For 3 years, I'd lived like a ghost in this city, and now, suddenly I saw strangers building bridges back to the world. Grace and the rescue team examined Nova again. They set up a small corner in the backyard, laid down clean blankets, covered it with a tarp. Grace smiled as she watched Nova move slowly around her pups. "She's going to be fine," she said. "She could live many more years." "And the puppies?" I asked. "Strong," Grace replied. "They'll start nursing well in a few days. If you'd like, we can help find adopters for them." I shook my head softly. "Not yet. Let them stay a little longer. It's too soon to say goodbye." News about Nova spread faster than I ever imagined. That afternoon, the local paper ran a story: "Man rescues Doberman mother in Detroit rain." Strangers began sending messages of thanks, many with photos of their own rescued dogs. One wrote, "I lost my daughter last year. Watching your video helped ease something inside me." That evening, I sat on the porch with Nova's head resting on my leg. Above us, the city's neon lights glowed through the mist, turning into soft streaks that looked like upside-down rain. My apartment, once silent, now pulsed with life, the rhythm of small paws tapping the floor, the breath of warmth, laughter from neighbor kids who'd stopped by to visit. I looked at Nova. She was different now. Her eyes were still deep but peaceful, like someone who had finally walked out of the fire. "You're not just my miracle anymore, Nova," I said quietly. "You've helped this whole city remember how to see again." She tilted her head, and I swear I saw her tail flick just once. In that moment, I understood no act of kindness ever stops where it begins. That stormy night didn't just save a life. It opened a conversation between people and their own compassion. If anyone ever asks me why I still believe in goodness, I just show them that video. No explanation needed. Just let them hear the small cry in the rain and how the city answered it. 3 months later, spring arrived. Detroit changed color. The trees lining the street began to bloom, and sunlight draped its gold over the cracked old walls. I opened my windows, letting in the scent of coffee and damp earth. In the corner of the room, Nova lay stretched out on the blue blanket, her 3 pups, Scout Lila and Hope, running in circles, tails wagging wildly, their little feet tapping on the wooden floor. The apartment, that once felt like a sealed box, now echoed with life. Every morning, I stepped onto the porch with my coffee and watched Nova teach her pups how to walk, how to bark, how to chase a leaf. Small things, yes, but enough to fill the hollow in my heart that had been empty for 3 long years. One afternoon, Grace returned with her team. She brought a large framed photo taken that first night when I carried Nova out of the trash bag. The headlights shone across my rain-soaked coat. In the corner of the photo, she'd written a single line: "Sometimes a miracle is simply hearing the cry everyone else ignored." She handed me the frame, her eyes warm as she looked around the now lived-in apartment. "Are you planning to keep them all?" I smiled, my gaze never leaving Nova. Maybe it's not me who chose them. Maybe they chose me. Since that story was told, people have come by often. Children are bringing cookies. Elderly folks are bringing blankets. Some just standing outside the window smiling. No one says much. They only want to see what they believe to remind themselves that the world still holds something worth believing in. One Sunday morning, a group of students put up a small wooden sign at the fence where Nova had once been abandoned. It read, "At this street a cry was heard, and love answered." I stood there for a long time, saying nothing. The wind brushed through my hair, carrying the faint sound of puppies barking somewhere behind me. Someone tapped my shoulder. It was the little girl who'd given the rubber bone toy. She looked up and said softly, "Mr. Ethan, thank you for hearing them." I knelt down and smiled. "No, sweetheart, thank you for hearing too." That night, as the city settled into quiet, I sat on the porch. Nova rested her head on my leg, her breathing steady and warm. On the wall inside the small blue cloth still hung its white thread, reading, "For Lucy," glimmering in the lamp's soft glow. I looked at it and whispered, "Lucy, you see I'm not alone anymore." Outside, the yellow streetlights washed over the road. Each one felt like a promise. Each breath from Nova felt like a new heartbeat. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind, to the breathing, to the rhythm of my own heart, until they all blended into one song, a song of forgiveness, of kindness, and of a small miracle called being heard. If you've stayed with me till the very end, thank you for listening with us. Now, tell me where you're listening from, because maybe right where you are, another miracle is beginning. Thank you for staying. Not everyone has the patience to stop and hear a small cry in a loud world. But you did, and that means goodness is still alive. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Have you ever saved a life, any life at all? And if you hear a small cry in the rain tonight, will you stop? Share this story, hit like, and subscribe to help us keep spreading these small stories of healing. Because sometimes all it takes is one person listening, and the world becomes a little less cold. Where are you watching from? Tell me your city below, so we can see how far compassion travels across this earth.